The sun was just rising over the quiet little town of Willow Creek. Birds chirped softly, and the smell of warm earth filled the air. It was a perfect day for an adventure. Sarah and her husband Mark had planned this trip for weeks. They were excited to take their young daughter, Lily, camping in the desert for the first time. Sarah packed snacks, clothes, water, and toys for Lily. Mark checked the tent on top of their white truck, made sure the tires were full, and filled the tank with gas. They waved goodbye to their neighbors with big smiles, not knowing it would be the last time anyone in town saw them. Lily sat in the back seat with her yellow dress and pink shoes, holding her favorite stuffed bear. She was only 4 years old and full of energy. She loved when her mom sang songs in the car and when her dad made silly faces in the mirror. As they drove farther into the desert, the roads became dusty and narrow. Mark followed a map he had found online that showed a secret camping spot near a cliff. He wanted to show Sarah and Lily the stars at night from a high place. "It'll be beautiful," he had said with a big grin. They reached the spot just before sunset. It was quiet, peaceful, and surrounded by dry hills and cactus plants. Sarah cooked beans over a small fire, while Mark set up the ladder to the tent on top of the truck. Lily played in the dirt, laughing as she made shapes with rocks. That night, they all climbed up into the rooftop tent and watched the stars. Mark pointed out constellations, and Lily clapped her hands. It was a happy night. But that night would be the last time anyone heard from them. The next morning, something changed. No one is sure what happened. Maybe they heard a noise and went to check it out. Maybe they tried to drive somewhere nearby and got lost. All people knew was that they never returned. When they didn't come home after a few days, friends got worried. A search team was sent out. Helicopters flew over the desert. People walked for miles calling their names, but no signs were found. Not one piece of clothing, no tire marks, no tent, nothing. It was like they had disappeared into thin air. The case was marked as missing persons. Some thought they had just left town to start a new life. Others believed something bad had happened. But no one knew the truth. Years passed. The town of Willow Creek moved on, but their names were still remembered. Their son, Evan, who was just a baby when they disappeared, grew up hearing stories about his parents and sister. He lived with his grandparents, who always spoke kindly about Sarah and Mark. Evan often looked at old photos, trying to feel connected to the family he never got to know. As he got older, he started asking more questions. The mystery of what happened to them burned inside him like a quiet fire. He made a promise to himself that one day he would find out the truth. On his 22nd birthday, Evan decided to take time off from school. He bought a small drone with a camera, packed a backpack, and drove to the desert. He used old maps, the ones his father had used. He talked to people who had been part of the search years ago. For days, Evan searched the dry land. He walked under the hot sun, looked under rocks, and flew his drone over hills and cliffs. He didn't give up. On the 5th day, he flew his drone high above a dry canyon. As the drone moved over a sharp bend, he saw something strange on the screen. His heart began to race. There, at the bottom of a steep drop, half covered in sand and dust, was a white truck. The same one from the pictures. The same mountain logo still visible on the side. Evan dropped the controller and ran, not even feeling the sharp rocks under his feet. Evan reached the edge of the canyon, breathing hard. He stood at the top of the cliff, looking down at the wreck. The white truck was upside down, its wheels sticking in the air like the legs of a dead insect. Rust had eaten into the doors, and one of the windows was broken. A suitcase and a small silver ladder lay nearby, half buried in the sand. Evan's throat felt dry. His heart pounded like a drum. This wasn't just any truck. This was the one his parents had taken on their last trip. The same design on the side. The same ladder. His mind rushed with questions. What happened? Were they still down there? He scrambled down the side of the canyon slowly, grabbing onto dry roots and rocks for balance. The sun was high now, beating down on his back, but he didn't stop. Every step brought him closer to the truth he had chased for so long. When he finally reached the bottom, he walked around the truck slowly. The tires were flat, and sand had piled up inside the cabin. The smell of dust and rust filled the air. Carefully, he peeked inside. Old, Torn clothes were still on the seats. A tiny pink shoe, faded from the sun, sat quietly under the front passenger seat. Evan swallowed hard. That shoe had once belonged to his sister. He moved around to the back of the truck and noticed something even more shocking. A few feet away, under a dry bush, were the remains of a small campfire. Black stones arranged in a circle. Near it, an old kettle. There were even empty cans and spoons, dried out from years in the heat. Someone had stayed here, maybe for a while. That meant they hadn't died right away. They had survived the crash, at least for a time. Evan's mind filled with images. His mother tending the fire, his sister playing with stones, his father looking up at the cliff, maybe trying to get help. The thought made Evan's chest hurt. He sat down in the sand, breathing slowly, trying to stay calm. He took out his phone and began taking pictures. He also marked the location on his GPS and wrote notes. This was important. He needed to show people. Maybe now they could finally find out what had happened. But as he walked closer to the truck again, something caught his eye. There, under the driver's side door, was a small, leather notebook. The cover was dry and cracked, but it looked like someone had hidden it there. Evan picked it up gently, brushed off the sand, and opened it. The first page had his mother's handwriting. Day 1 after crash. We're okay. Mark has a small cut. Lily is scared but safe. Evan's eyes filled with tears. This was her journal, a record of what happened after the crash. He sat down and began to read. Page after page. His mother had written everything. How they had rolled off the cliff while trying to find a better spot. How the truck flipped and landed badly. How Mark hurt his leg and couldn't climb out. They had stayed by the truck, hoping someone would find them. They rationed food and water. She had even drawn small pictures for Lily to keep her happy. We play games to pass the time. One page said, Lily asks when we will go home. Evan turned the pages slowly. The tone of the journal started to change after a week. Water was running out. They were getting weaker. Mark tried to climb out of the canyon but fell. Sarah wrote how scared she was. She wrote letters to Evan, even though he was just a baby then. I hope you grow up strong. I hope someone tells you we loved you more than anything. Evan's hands shook as he read those words. He held the journal close, like a treasure. For years, people had guessed what happened, but this little book told the truth. His parents had fought to survive. They had stayed together. They had left behind something beautiful, even in the middle of the desert. As the sun began to set, Evan stood up. He looked around one last time, then began to climb back up the cliff. He knew this was just the beginning. He would bring the journal to the police, tell the news, show the world. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he had something more important. He had proof, and he had their words. He wasn't alone anymore. Evan drove back to town with the journal held tightly in his hands. His mind was spinning with emotion. The setting sun cast a soft golden light on the road, and dust swirled behind his tires. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't need noise. His head was full of thoughts, his mom's handwriting, the small shoe, the crash site. After so many years of wondering, he had finally found them. The truth had always been out there, buried under sand and silence. Now he had something to show the world, something that would bring peace not just to him, but to everyone who had known his parents. When Evan reached Willow Creek, it was already dark. He went straight to his grandparents' house. The lights were on in the living room, and his grandmother was sitting in her usual chair, knitting. His grandfather sat across from her, reading an old newspaper. When they saw Evan at the door, dusty and tired but holding something close to his chest, they knew something had changed. He didn't have to say a word. He just nodded and held out the journal. His grandmother took it gently, opening the worn cover. She read the first line and froze. Tears filled her eyes. It's Sarah's, she whispered. His grandfather took off his glasses, stared at the handwriting, then looked at Evan. Where did you find this? He asked softly. Evan told them everything. The drone, the canyon, the truck, the campfire, the small shoe. They sat in silence for a long time after he finished. It was like the weight of 11 years had suddenly become real. The pain they had pushed aside to survive each day came rushing back. But there was something else, too. Relief. They weren't lost anymore. They had been found. His grandmother hugged Evan tightly. "You brought them home," she said. The next morning, Evan went to the local sheriff's office and showed them the photos, the GPS location, and the journal. The sheriff, a kind man with gray hair and a tired face, looked at the evidence for a long time before speaking. "We searched that desert for weeks," he said, "but we never went that deep into the canyon." He called the state authorities, and soon a team was sent out to recover the truck and anything else left at the site. News spread quickly through the town. People who had known Sarah and Mark came by to offer their thoughts. Some brought flowers. Some just cried. Everyone had something to say. "They were good people," one woman said. "They didn't deserve to be forgotten." A week later, Evan stood at the edge of the canyon again, this time with a full recovery crew behind him. They carefully lifted the truck from the sand, using ropes and machines. They took everything back to town to be cleaned and studied. Among the items recovered were Lily's stuffed bear, Mark's watch, and a small box of family photos. Each piece told a story. Each item brought them closer to the people they had been. The notebook was copied and scanned, and experts confirmed it was written by Sarah. Her words were read aloud at a town ceremony held in the park. Evan stood on the stage with the journal in his hands. He didn't cry. He read her final message, the one she had written in shaky handwriting on the last page. "To Evan, we love you. We believe you'll find us. We'll always be with you." The crowd stood in silence. Some held hands. Some closed their eyes. After the ceremony, Evan walked alone to the edge of town, where the land stretched out into the desert. The same desert that had hidden his family for so long. He looked out at the flat, endless land. It no longer scared him. It didn't feel empty anymore. It had given him answers. It had given him back his parents. And it had made him stronger. Back home, Evan started building a small memorial near the house. He placed a stone with their names, and under it, he buried copies of the journal pages. He planted a tree next to it, a tall one that would grow with time. It was his way of keeping their memory alive, of turning something painful into something beautiful. He still had questions, but now he also had something even better: truth, love, and the courage they had left behind. Months passed after the discovery of the truck, but the story never faded. It spread far beyond Willow Creek. News channels covered it, calling it a story of love, loss, and a son's unshakable hope. People from other towns and even other countries wrote letters to Evan, saying how moved they were by what he had done. Some shared their own stories of missing loved ones. Others said they had found the strength to keep looking, just like him. But for Evan, the real story wasn't about the headlines. It was about the quiet moments, the feeling of holding the journal in his hands, the sound of his mother's voice in his head as he read her words. He kept reading the journal over and over. He knew every line by heart now, but each time, it felt like hearing from his mom again. In one part, she had written about how they had tried to stay strong for Lily, how they had sung songs and made games from stones. She even joked about how Mark burned their last can of beans. It still made Lily laugh. She had written. Evan could picture it clearly, like a scene from a movie playing in his mind. It was a sad story, but it was also full of love. His parents hadn't given up. They had done everything they could, and in the end, they had left something for him. Not just words, but strength. Evan began to work with the town library to create a special section about his family. He donated the photos, a copy of the journal, and some of the items found at the crash site. He even created a small documentary using his drone footage, showing the canyon, the truck, and the journey he took. School kids watched it in class. People cried while watching it at the community center. One teacher said it taught the kids more than any book could about love, bravery, and never giving up. Evan didn't do it for fame. He did it because he wanted others to know who his family was. They weren't just a mystery. They were people full of dreams, jokes, songs, and stories. One afternoon, Evan stood again at the canyon's edge. He had returned alone, just to feel close to them. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of warm dust and dry plants. He walked down slowly, retracing his steps. At the bottom, where the truck had once rested, there was now only a flat space with a few small stones and the remains of the campfire. He sat there, closed his eyes, and listened. No sound, just the hum of the wind and his own heartbeat. It was peaceful. He smiled, imagining his mom sitting next to him, Lily in her lap, Mark poking at the fire with a stick. In his heart, they were there. Not gone. Just in another place. He picked up a stone and wrote something on it with a marker he'd brought. We found you. We love you. Then he placed it gently near the campfire circle. It wasn't much, but it felt right. As he stood to leave, he turned back one last time. The desert looked the same as it had years ago, wide, quiet, endless. But now it was filled with meaning. It had become part of a story, part of his family's legacy. Back in town, Evan continued his life. He went back to school, studied environmental science, and joined a team working on desert conservation. He told people it was because he wanted to protect the land that had protected his family. He stayed close with his grandparents, visiting them every week. On the anniversary of the discovery, they always lit a candle and read a page from the journal. It became a tradition, not of mourning, but of memory. Evan kept the original journal in a glass case in his room. On hard days, he would sit and read from it, like a conversation with the past. The mystery that haunted Willow Creek for 11 years was finally solved. But the story didn't end there. It lived on in every heart it touched. In the tree growing in Evan's yard, in the little library corner filled with photos, in the journal that spoke of love, courage, and hope, and in the quiet courage of a boy who never stopped looking, who found not only the truth, but also himself.